Hi everyone, I'm making you a screencast video so that I can explain the directions orally for reading response number 1. So you download this from assignments in La Lima, and you can see here, and this is your first reading response this semester. So as you get through the semester, you will notice that I set these reading responses up very similarly. So you'll always begin with, okay, this is the assignment. Your overall assignment is for this reading response is to create a literacy and discipline area identity timeline. So let me explain. So first, you're going to always do some reading. And the great news is that you're not required to buy a textbook or anything for this class. I am providing all of the articles for you, so I hope you're excited to have that be the case, that you didn't have to purchase anything. So the two articles that you're reading for this response are two of my favorites. In fact, Yetta Goodman, I think of her like my grandmother, academic grandmother. I've taken classes with her, and she's now retired, but she is prolific. She and her husband, Ken Goodman, have written so much. So I'm excited for you to read a very seminal piece. This is old, but it's a seminal article that I think all people taking a literacy course should read. It's called Multiple Roads to Literacy. In fact, in 1984, Yetta wrote this, and I quoted her from the article, so hopefully this quote stands out to you when you start reading. There is no single road to becoming literate. And that said, I can't wait to hear how you, when you reflect about your own multiple roads that you've taken to become literate, that you will identify with some of the roads that Yetta has identified. You also may have taken roads that she has not identified in the article. So if that's the case, we'll talk about that, and you can bring that up in your writing. But again, read this. You download it from La Lima. You're also going to be reading, it's chapter 1 from Doug Buell's book called Developing Readers in the Academic Discipline. So when you start to read that, there's a lot of things that I want you to do with interacting with his chapter. So as you're reading it, first of all, Doug Buell, he's a former social studies teacher, and he explains this idea that we have a reader identity and we also have a discipline identity. And you already know in our first class that I talked about this is going to be a central concept that we're going to be exploring for the next couple weeks, looking at identity. And one of the first things that he will introduce is James G's work. And I'm going to pop up some work on James G. You will read about it in this chapter, so pay extra attention to it. Highlight it, underline things. But James G has 4 ways of viewing identity. And by the way, I worked with James G at Arizona State University. He is prolific and famous in his own way. And he identified that in these 4 categories, first, you have your nature identity. This is the way you were born. This is your ethnicity. Going over here to the examples on the right-hand side, this is your height, your age. Are you a twin? Which we happen to have twins in our class. Do you have health conditions? All of these are things that you didn't choose. They're forces in nature, and you were developed in nature. So, and interestingly, because you identify a certain gender and you identify at the age that you are today, because what I read when I was 5 years old compared to when I'm now a middle-aged woman is completely different. So all of these natural things that come from nature shape our identity and also help us think about what we read. There's also institutional identities. Again, think of all the institutional identities that are authorized by other authorities that allow you to be identified. First of all, you are all students, college students, university students at the University of Hawaii. You are all united and authorized by the institution. I am an authorized professor, an associate professor with tenure at the University of Hawaii. These things come from my institutional identity. So look at the examples here. Again, read about these examples in Doug Buell's as well. I just created my own slide to bring more emphasis to it. Also, you are identified by your individual traits. Has someone ever described you as charismatic or smart or energetic or shy? These are all, again, in this example box on the right-hand side, examples of your discourse identity. And then finally, James G. talks about your affinity identities. This is when you do things like, I have a little example of a hula dancer and a soccer player. These are the things that you practice in your life that bring you together in an affinity group. Again, think about examples of all of your identities in these 4 ways, and it will really help you when you start to fill out your reader profile. So if I say I am female, I identify female, so I might read health journals that are specifically talking about the physiology and the physical things that women go through. So I might read Women's World. I think that exists. I'm just giving this as an example. So I want you to create, and you can type literally into these boxes, and then you can copy and paste these into your own Word document so that I can read these. So again, think about James G's work, because Doug Buell talks about it in the chapter, and go through and identify as many things as you can as you reflect about your reading profile. Because you are blank, whatever religion, do you read this? Maybe you are a surfer, so you read waves and tide charts. Just go through and think about how your identity influences your reading. Next, notice in the chapter from Doug Buell that he also has this graphic organizer called Revisiting Your Reader Profile, Choosing Text versus Obligation Text. Again, just like the previous graphic organizer, go ahead and type in here. These are choice texts. These are all the things you love to read. It is not a chore for you. You read it because you want to read it. So think about, it might even be your Facebook. It doesn't have to just be a book. Think of multiple types of texts that you enjoy reading. It can be all digital, whatever you prefer. So go through and list all of your choice texts. Then you also have what's called, and Doug Buell gives you examples in the chapter, prove to me that you did the reading by following his lead. These are personal texts that you personally obligate yourself. So it's not like you want to always read these things, but you know you have to read them. No one else is telling you to read them, but you feel obligated to read them. So it's a personal obligation. So think about all the texts that you know you are obligated on a personal level. And then you also have all of these texts that other people require you to read. For example, I am requiring you to read. You're a student, so you're required to read the Doug Buell and the Yetta Goodman article for this reading response. So you might want to group these things into, texts for school. So consider that as you move forward. Okay, so then the last graphic organizer that you're going to fill out is called, What is your profile as a disciplinary reader? You are going to go through and rate your level of confidence in these different discipline areas. So you can simply just put X's in these boxes. For example, do you consider yourself highly confident in literary fiction? I happen to, so I'm just going to put an X there because I love literature. I was an English language arts teacher, and I've read literary fiction for my whole life. So I do feel I'm pretty highly confident. But when it comes to math, I sometimes, especially high-level math, when I have to read about it, I struggle. So go through and rate your level of confidence with each of these discipline areas. Once again, you can copy and paste all of these graphic organizers straight into a Word document. Again, please do the reading. Obviously, you could fill these out without doing the reading, but you got to do the reading, and you got to prove to me that you did the reading, because that will come in a little bit. So the second part of this assignment is you are going to create a timeline. I love timelines. Timelines is a literacy strategy it's because it's a tool that will help you organize your thinking. You can create any kind of timeline you desire. In fact, there's this online timeline that, again, if you get onto this website and you do not find it user-friendly and it's too hard to make a digital timeline, stop after 5 minutes. If you're not understanding how to use this website, Don't waste your time. You don't have time to learn the digital tools. If you are digitally savvy and love this website, go for it. If it doesn't take you too long. This is just a suggestion. Remember, I said this is not required. I just said to consider it. Otherwise, if you are going to make a timeline, you can be old school. You can even hand draw it, and you can scan it and upload it as a photo or a scanned image to Lalima. I simply made a digital timeline in Word document, and I started listing some significant events. This isn't my own personal life. This is just some things I made up for an example. So go through, and right here, you can use Microsoft Word, a PowerPoint. Some people love making timelines in PowerPoint, even Prezi. Again, if you use Prezi, it's a digital tool, free online, and you know that tool and it works for you, go for it. If you do not use those tools, don't waste your time. You can draw it, you can hand draw your timeline on paper if you desire to do so. You can even bring it to class and give it to me on paper. So use images if you'd like, or symbols on your timeline to make it visual if you would like as well. Remember, you can't put everything on your timeline, so you want to think about, going back to this description, as you read the articles, you are thinking about all of the things, especially the Yetta Goodman. Concentrate on the different roads that you took to becoming literate. Consider what roads you've taken to becoming and identifying your discipline. So once you have done this, you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 8 events. So when I look at your timeline to get a passing grade, you have to have at least 8 things. You can have up to 11. You have 8 to 11, but the minimum is 8. So when I read your timeline, there's only 3 examples here. Don't go with, this example is just 3, but you have to have at least 8. So I just wanted to show you a glimpse of a small example of what it would look like. Then, now I hope you agree, this is easy. Making a timeline and reflecting on the significant events in our life based on what's appropriate from what you read, that you're connecting to the Yetta Goodman and the Buell article. Because you're not just timelining everything. You're thinking about significant events that helped you become the reader and the writer that you are. You're thinking about it from a lens of literacy and how you became literate. So think about on your timeline, for example, this is my parents read to me nightly. That was a significant event in your life. Those might have been very important events that helped you become the reader that you are. This one, parents divorce. Well, for some people, they might be like, well, how will that shape literacy? So let's read below. So next, after you have your timeline, you need to write a minimum of 8 to 11 narratives. These are short narratives. Notice they're just about a paragraph. You can go longer, you can go a little shorter, but this is what makes an A from a C. You have to prove that you did the reading. So you just don't say, oh, my parents divorced and I started journaling and journaling is important. You have to prove how it connected to the reading. So here's an example, 1995. After completing Buell's 2011 reader profile, I realized how many life events shaped my literacy activities. For example, in the 4th grade, my parents divorced. This was difficult. However, I started journaling in a notebook every day to deal with my emotional pain. This writing practice routine helped me to deal with my feelings. Now that I reflect, this event also influenced my love for sociology and psychology, which is why I want to be a social studies teacher, specifically teaching sociology and psychology. Buell validates this fact that our life experiences, such a divorce, even though it was sad, shaped my literacy and discipline identity. Now, what I like about this, and this is why this would get an A, this is why this would get an A grade, is because this person is proving that they paid attention to Buell's ideas and made a text-to-self connection to the reading. So they do responsible citing, showing me that Buell's words and how they connected it to their parents' divorce and how that led them to read and write certain ways, and that this led them to their dream of becoming a social studies teacher, how it all connects the dots. It's pretty simple in that it's not very long, but it proves that the reading was done. Here's another example that started playing the guitar 2001. So here gives me the background of why starting the guitar is an important literacy event in this person's life. When Buell, again, me as the professor, is like, oh good, they did their reading, and they're even saying on page 2 and 3, when they were reading about the reading and identity, they realized that they did a lot of reading out of obligation. However, in my high school years, I loved listening to music with my family at home. Goodman referred to this, so again, nice connection. They're proving that yet a Goodman called this a family tradition road. And because they're able to prove that they were listening to music and that's a family tradition road, this led to literacy because music was a priority in my home. I memorized the words, learned new vocabulary and meanings to my favorite song. I started playing the guitar and loved learning to play music at my church. Therefore, I read, listened, and wrote musical Christian score. These life events shaped my identity to becoming a music teacher. So again, this isn't my personal story, but these are just 2 examples that I wanted to share. And I want you to write, this is just 2 examples. You need to write a minimum of 8 to 11. So after you get your timeline as a tool to help jog your memory of all of your wonderful events, connect it to all the reading. So take good notes in your reading, highlight quotes. These are all indirect quotes, but you can even quote Buell and Goodman, which would prove to me that you were connecting to their words. So I hope you enjoy these readings and make those good connections. Everyone's story is different. A huge thing that should come across is that I am learning your story, and I can't wait to read this because you're going to be telling me about your life, and I'm going to learn about your life as I read and how you connect it to the readings. Come prepared to share your timeline in class with small groups. Also, due to time limitations, you're only going to be able to share 2 or 3 of your significant events, so you won't be able to share all 8 or to 11, which is the range, but come prepared to share, and depending on time, we'll see how many you can get through. After you complete this assignment, not only bring it to class, but make sure you upload it to La Lima, and I will read and respond, and you will get your grade back in La Lima. One other note, you're going to see this in every single reading response throughout this class. It's called the annotated bibliography. I do not require you to turn this in for a grade. I don't grade this or even have to see it. This is a program requirement. By the time, for those of you that have been admitted into our program, congratulations. This is a habit of mind we want you to have. If you are planning to be in our program and haven't been admitted yet, that's no problem. You still want to use an annotated bibliography. So what you're going to do is, first of all, here are the 2 readings from this reading response. I put it into APA 6th edition format for you, so you have the full citation. This will help you also in my final paper. And you want to write some notes and quotes that you want to remember from the reading. Now, again, you're already doing that in these little, this is like a large annotated bibliography by you having all of your timeline notes, but you might just want to pull a couple of your favorites after you write everything out and just stick them in this annotated bibliography. Why don't you create a folder called Annotated Bibliography for the ITE secondary program, and for every single education course you take, you should start a list of all of the readings you do. Make notes on all of them, because when you go to student teach, which is exhausting because you teach all day long, full time, but you still have a portfolio that you have to create through your student teaching, and you have to show that you are making text to self connections, and you're going to want to have all of your literature reviewed. This is where you can find all of your literature, which is so exciting, and you will love yourself. You will appreciate how organized you were by keeping these good habits of mind alive throughout the program, because students who do not do this really regret it at the end of the program. They're like, oh yeah, I read that article back in ITE 401 and now I can't even remember what it was called. So you want to make sure that you have these references so that you can pull them later. You will need them for my class too for your final paper. So this is not only for the program, it's for my class as well. So, but please try to do this for all of your classes. And again, it's not required, that meaning I don't grade this, you're not turning it in, but it is required for your habit of mind. So I hope you will do that. So anyway, I hope you found this screencast helpful. You can view it over and over if it helps. If there's any other additional concerns or questions you have about completing this reading response, please let me know as soon as possible and I will email you or call you immediately. Thanks everyone for listening.